Hello and welcome to Nightmare Road. And tonight it is me, SOS, and my co-host,
Haywire.
Haywire. And Decon's internet is sketchy. We're under blizzard warnings right now, and it's just been storming all week. And so he couldn't make it because his internet is up and down and up and down. So we're going to go ahead and push on without him. And we have a murder story tonight. So this is the trigger warning. If you don't like true crime, then you need to bail out on this before we get started. But this is a true crime story, and it is a wild one. So let's get started, Haywire.
Yeah, it's definitely one that's captivated the nation, right? It's been turned into multiple TV series, there's books about it. It's a very popular one. It's the Skidmore Bully and a town that conspired to kill. It takes place in Skidmore, Missouri. So it's about 100 miles from Kansas City, I think it said.
Yeah. So, and it's small. You can see from the sign here, population 284.
Yeah, back in the 80s, I think the population was like 400. So it's decreased in population over time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but the star of our show, or our story tonight, I should say, is Ken McElroy. He was kid number 15 out of 16 to a poor farming family. He ended up dropping out of school in the 8th grade and decided, instead of getting a stable job, that he was just going to become a raccoon hunter. He did move to Denver for a short period of time when he was 18 and married his first wife, but he could not hold down a stable job and ended up coming back to Skidmore. So the rest of our story just takes place in Skidmore. He one article talked about how hunting raccoons tied in with petty crime. So I don't know what the correlation to that author was, but it cracks me up that they thought because he hunted raccoons that it would turn you into a petty thief. So any of our friends, like, we need to make fun of them for doing that. But he started with small theft, like petty theft crimes, but then he set his eyes on higher prizes, right? So he ended up becoming a livestock rustler. He
Yeah.
would steal livestock in the middle of the night. He paid off a lot of people so that they could sell his hot livestock. And at this time, Missouri didn't require branding, so he was able to
Right.
get away with it because no one could prove it wasn't him. And
Ugh.
the messed up thing about him is he would go into the bar with all these bags of money and kind of like flaunted it and like showed off to the farmers and the ranchers, like, yeah, I just stole all your stuff. I'm filthy rich. Like, I'm doing so good right now. So you can kind of tell already how the town is going to feel about him, but it just gets worse from here.
You bet.
Yeah, he was charged one time for the livestock wrestling, but they ended up dropping the case because they didn't have any evidence. Um, his, like I said, he was big into raccoon hunting. He had a lot of hunting buddies, and these hunting buddies would end up coming into play later on in his story for helping him out. But the big thing they talked about with him was that he had an eye for young meat, which is because he was a pedophile. So one of his
Mm.
activities he would do is he would sit outside of the junior high school, kind of by the playground. He would befriend a lot of the boys in order to meet with the female peers. And he would target the girls that were poor, uneducated, buy them gifts, give them rides in the truck. Like, he had a whole system down. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, he was a smooth talker, it sounds like, too. And I mean, he wasn't that bad looking, right?
Yeah,
So
one
black
of
hair,
the
blue
reports,
eyes.
yeah, they like compared him to Elvis Presley, and they were like so good looking in his young age, and then as he got old and fat and kept dyeing his hair just like this nasty inky black color. But yeah, I heard that he was supposedly a smooth talker too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So with all of these, like arson, assault, all this stuff that he did, right? So I think I read somewhere that he was charged with over 20 crimes before things got really serious, and he was never convicted of anything.
No, and he had a damn good lawyer, and his lawyer loved him. His lawyer said about 3 to 4 times a year he would have to go to court for Ken. And he would pay him very well. And he was always very punctual. He mentioned that he was probably his only friend, but I think I saw somewhere that McElroy would pay him like 5 grand per charge he dropped or something. So back in the 80s to pay 5 grand for that, like that's a pretty penny. He did pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So he met his second wife, Shannon, or Sharon. I don't remember, but she was 15 at the time. He also impregnated a lot of girls too, so not all of them became his wives, but it was kind of confusing in the stories to like keep up with like who's who. Like you almost needed a little diagram of like which girl was who. But yeah,
Yeah.
he
Yeah, and he actually, I mean, how many times did he get married? I
four
think it was,
times.
yeah, so 4 times, but he had all these kids.
Yeah.
Um,
Um
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so Sharon, that's her name. The second wife was 15. The third wife was Alice, also 15. The last wife was Trina, who was 14, but he had been courting her since she was 12.
Oh
And
my God.
all the girls
That's
were
just
around this age.
sick. That's
It's
sick.
disgusting.
Oh,
He's
I have
estimated
a
to
picture of
have,
Trina here that I'll put up. And obviously this is later, so
yeah.
but that's Trina. Pretty girl.
Yeah, he supposedly had between 10 and 15 kids between all these girls.
Wow.
And he was really abusive to them, very violent, made sure to make them do acts that made them belittle themselves. People said that you would see him punch a woman all the time, but you would never see him raise a fist to a man.
Of
So,
course not. He's a bully. He
yeah,
was a
he's a
bully.
coward. Yeah, yeah. So with Trina, who we just saw, um, he started courting her when she was 12. He was really into her. He would pay boys to take her out on dates and then bring her to him. So the parents would think she's out with peers and would be at this old man's house. I think he was in his 30s at this time. I don't quite remember, but I'm pretty sure it was in his 30s. And then by the time she was 14, he impregnated her, and so she moved in with his third wife, and
His little harem there.
his little harem. Yeah, lots of kids, lots of, yeah, kid wives, child
Uh,
wives. So um they all did not get along. Like the three, McElroy, Alice, and Trina, did not get along at first. They fought a lot, and the fights usually ended in abuse. Usually he would beat them up and just solve it that way. But somewhere along the line, Trina and Alice ended up becoming good friends because they ended up running away after Trina gave birth to Trina's parents' house with their kids. Um, Unfortunately, it didn't take very long for McElroy to figure out what happened and bring them home.
well, and didn't he do something to Trina's parents?
Yeah, so for the girls and the kids, he took them by gunpoint back to the house, to his house. He then went back to Trina's parents' house and shot the family dog and then set the house on fire. This is, yeah, it's
So,
insanity.
I mean, absolute intimidation and terror tactics, to get what he wants.
Yeah. And he did this with a lot of people. He had a lot of tactics. One of his popular tactics was just to hang around outside people's homes, or, like he just had a way of getting under everyone's skin to the point that no one wanted to mess with him anymore. So after this incident, 2 days later, he really beat up Trina. He did horrible things to those girls when he brought them back. But he ended up taking Trina to a doctor, and the doctor was able to get out of her kind of what was going on. And this is where he kind of got some of his more serious charges. He was charged with arson, assault, rape. But unfortunately, he made bail very quickly. He made bail quickly in a lot of his cases that went that far. Trina was so upset, they kept her sedated in the hospital for a few days, and they sent her baby to a foster family before they ended up sending her to a safe house. And I don't know if the safe house became her foster family or how that quite worked. But McElroy would sit outside the safe house Trina was at, and he actually got a hold of the parents that were there, and he called them one time and said, "I'll do a trade for you. I'll do a girl for a girl." And they were kind of like, "What do you mean by that?" He had stalked them enough. He figured out that they had a daughter, what her bus route was, where she went to
Oh my
school.
God.
Yeah, yeah, and nothing came out of it because Trina ended up staying with this family for a little while. But she ended up leaving at some point, saying that she's going to live with her grandma. The foster family was like, "That sounds really weird," but they couldn't do anything to stop her. And what had happened was that McElroy discovered that all those charges would be dropped on him if he married Trina. Because a wife can't testify against her husband, right? So he was still technically married to his second wife, even though she didn't live with them for a few years. Got her to come down to the courthouse the next day to sign divorce papers. Intimidated Trina's mom. And mind you, like, he just killed their dog and burned down their house. Like, she's
Right.
probably terrified of this man. Signs
Right.
over her daughter, which I can't fathom, but I'm also trying not to judge in this case, right?
Right.
And that same day, they get married and the case is dropped.
God.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
So
This guy is. This is. I mean, you just want to. You just want to beat the living shit out of this guy. Sorry, but that's it. I mean, you just want to. You just. I
yeah,
can't. I can't. Yeah. It's hard to believe that this guy's still going, because in a town this small, there's no secrets.
yeah,
Everybody
and
knows what he's doing.
yeah, and nobody's like everyone. I'm presuming is too afraid to do anything, but like it's just crazy that they're in that mindset that they can't do anything against this guy. Like this one guy is able to hold this power over all these people, and it just gets worse from here. Like,
Well,
yeah,
let's
I don't
keep
know.
going and see what else this guy has done.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about Mr. Henry, but he's a farmer in Skidmore. That,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Poor guy. He's out on his tractor, right? And he's plowing some fields. I mean, it's Skidmore, and I showed you a picture of it. It's pretty flat out there. So this guy's plowing his field, so he has a pretty good view of his property, and he sees old Ken over here. It is Ken, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
Ken, sitting next to his fence or doing something, or I think he was messing with the shotgun at that time or something like that. And so as he gets closer, there was an exchange of words between the two, like "What are you doing?" or something like that. And McElroy he shot him. He shoots him.
yeah,
I mean, he's just like shoots him. I mean, why? The guy's out plowing his fields just cause. I mean, this is one bad man. And so he was charged with the assault with the intent to kill. And despite Henry lived, Okay, his name was Romaine Henry, I think.
Yeah.
I, yeah. So okay, so Romaine lived, and he was going to testify, but and old Ken's out here going, I didn't do it. I wasn't out there. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know who shot him. And the case drags on and on and on, probably because his attorney is asking for continuances, because that's what you do, right? You just wear people down. And at the
Right.
same time, old Ken's sitting outside this poor old man's house, this poor farmer's house, over 100 times. I guess this guy was keeping a log of how many times Ken was sitting out inside front of his house. It was over 100 times. So
I
it's
can't
like
imagine
witness
how scary.
intimidation.
Yeah.
Oh, he's terrifying. He's already shot him. I mean, and we all know he's burned down house. So it's like, what? This poor guy's being terrorized. Anyway,
Well, too,
during the
like a lot of
go ahead.
people have called the police during a lot of the stuff that McElroy does, but it's like the police are almost on either on his side or don't care. Like they're just like,
Well, I think we were terrified of him too, because he's probably, I more than likely, he's probably threatened their family, their wives, their children. He's,
yeah.
I mean, come on, you're talking about, they might not have even had their own police force. So their police force is coming
Hmm.
from other towns, because these counties are like that. When you have small towns, you have, you share a force. Like, look at the town of Income, right? They don't have a police force anymore, right? So they have to rely on Bannock County Sheriff. So some of these towns don't have police officers, and then the ones that they do, he's probably intimidated the crap out of them,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, this is a bad guy. So anyway, I guess they go to, do they end up going to trial? Let's see.
Yeah, they
During the
do.
trial, huh?
Yeah, they do end up going to trial.
Oh yeah, but once again, he was acquitted.
Yeah,
Because
so
okay, think about a jury. So he's got to have a jury, right?
mhm.
I mean, unless you request a judge and no jury, you have a jury. You've intimidated the shit out of this town already. There's not anybody on that jury who's going to convict you.
Yeah,
And
you also
because you're
have a few
terrified.
hunting buddies who give you alibis, and they
Right.
also looked at Mr. Henry and they're like, actually, you have a history of being a petty theft yourself. So they like discredit him completely. So even though he's shot, he has the wound, he knows who did it, they just let him walk.
It's just such a frustrating case. It's amazing. So I mean, this wasn't that long ago.
No, this is
That
the
that
1980s.
Yeah, I mean, 1980 seems like for some of our viewers, oh my God, I want to, but it really wasn't that long ago. I mean, we're not talking about the 1920s and 1930s out here. This 1980s. And this guy has just absolutely terrorized this town to the point where he has carte blanche to do anything he wants to anybody.
Yeah, and he definitely acts that way too. He's always very,
Hmm.
reported to be cool, calm, collected, like nothing can touch him. He honestly felt that way.
Yeah. Okay, so what happens next?
So, what happens next? And this takes place on April 25th of 1980. So, just so that we kind of have more of a timeline here. But there there's conflicting stories, but the story that I read was that his kids were at a grocery store getting candy bars, and the clerk yelled out at one of the kids as they were leaving because one of the kids was walking away with a candy bar they didn't pay. They weren't accusing the kids or anything like that. They were just like, "Hey, I didn't ring that up." And one of the teenage kids freaked out. They were like, "How dare you accuse us of theft? Do you know who my dad is? Like, we'll never shop here again." Like, just like going off. And so this brings in the owners, the Bowen camps, and they try and have a reasonable discussion with these kids. The kids leave, and of course, guess who shows up 20 minutes later? their dad, Ken McElroy, and Trina. So Ken comes in with a knife, starts going off. Again, the Bowen camps are trying to have like a reasonable discussion, trying to cool the situation. And Trina is actually kind of egging it on, like telling her husband, like, go get him, fight him, like, how dare they dishonor our kids, kind of thing. And the store owners eventually ban the McElroys during this discussion. They're realizing nothing is going anywhere. It's not going to help. And this is very unlike them. Bo Bowenkamp, the husband of the owner duo, said that he wasn't ever brave like that. Like, he's like, I don't know where this courage came from, but in that moment, I told him that they weren't welcome. And he would probably come to regret it later. I don't know how he feels about it later. But the McElroys leave, and when the Bowenkamps leave the store that night, they notice that Ken is out in his car watching them. And they drive home, and they notice that Ken keeps passing back and forth in front of their house. And this happens for about a month, where McElroy keeps driving in front of their house, letting them know that they're there. They call the police. The police are like, well, he can drive wherever he wants. Like, we can't do anything for him driving in front of your house.
Now look how
Uh,
small this town is.
yeah, it's
You
like
know,
3
I
blocks.
mean, yeah. So, I mean, he's going to drive back and forth with no problem whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, you can easily justify why you're there. Like,
Yeah.
it's not hard. He then started upping the ante, right? He would go out in front of their house and fire off his shotgun. And he did this like repeatedly. And they called the cops. And once again, the cops were like, meh, like, he's harmless. There's nothing we can do. And so Bo was out getting something fixed in town and had a run in with Ken McElroy. And their exchange was brief, and I don't know what was said, but Bowenkamp ended up turning his back to McElroy, and that must have pissed him off because he shot him.
Hmm.
Bowenkamp was 6'3", and they said he just like completely folded, like dropped dead. But he didn't die. A boy discovered him, and Bowenkamp went to the hospital for a gunshot wound to the neck. And he was there for about 10 days, but miraculously made a recovery. This did go to court, and this is the only time McElroy was actually convicted, and he was sentenced to 2 years prison. However, he was released on bond later that day due to the appeals process, and just decided to continue to terrorize this town. He showed up to a bar right after with a bayonet attached to his rifle and started telling all the people in the bar what he was going to do to Bo Bowenkamp and what he would do to anyone else that might give him jail time. So he's just making all of these threats. Everybody's hearing it. And this is the point
This is the
everyone's trying
bar.
to. Yeah.
This is the bar. Yeah, just a tiny little building.
Yeah. Good old small town bar. So the town decides to convene a meeting the next day because everyone's really afraid. They're like, he just got 2 years prison and he's already out. Like, how do we protect ourselves? What are we going to do? And so I believe it was the Legion Hall that they met at, but they met at that the next morning with the cops, and they're frustrated. They're telling the cops, like, how do we protect ourselves? The cops are like, oh, like, just don't, like, go up to him. Make sure you don't, like, make him upset. Like, maybe we could do, like, watch. Like, people can watch. And people were really frustrated. They're like, isn't this your job? Like, this is the police job to protect us from this guy. And the best you can tell us is, like, just stay away. Like, yeah, so frustrating. And as fate would have it, Mr. McElroy and his wife would be at the bar that we just saw. So just down the street from the Legion Hall. And this gets back to the members at this meeting, and the session came to an end very conveniently. And all these people that were there filtered into the bar. They said that Ken didn't really care. Like, he saw the people coming in, but he just kept drinking his morning beer. Like, he just acted
Morning
very
beer, you know.
morning beer. You gotta have a shower or morning beer. So, yeah, people flooded in. He didn't act like he cared. It's kind of showing his arrogance that he thinks he's untouchable once again. He orders a six-pack to go and tells Trina that it's time to go and to hop in the truck. So they do so, and people start flooding out of the bar and surrounding the truck. And he turns on the truck, and they said he paused to grab a cigarette, and all of a sudden shots rang out. And Mr. McElroy, yeah, he was killed. He bled to death because no one called an ambulance. Like, they shot him and just left him. They pulled Trina out of the car, covered in his blood, to try and get her out of the way. But yeah, they just left him. And so the police come
And
to him.
there was like 30 to 60 people out there when
30
all
to
this
60.
happened.
Right.
Is what the reports are, right?
Yeah. And he's been shot by two separate guns. They can tell. And yeah, so nobody knows anything. Everyone's very silent. Everyone's like, "Oh, we didn't see
I
a shooter.
didn't
We
see a
didn't
thing.
see. I don't know what
Must have
happened."
been a drive-by.
Yeah, for like up to 60 people to just be like, I don't know. One guy was even like, "Oh yeah, that's a shame. That was such a nice truck to get shot up like that." Like, had
It
nothing
really
to
is.
say
It
with
really is.
that.
So,
So
but let's make it. Trina did not get shot, though, right?
nope, she's safe. She's safe and sound. She got
Okay.
pulled out of the car by some nice men that were worried about her safety. Um, and yeah, so they have, I think they said like 23 to 25 cops come down to like investigate this, and nobody sees anything. And
Wow.
he got the justice that he needed. Trina, though, came back later. I don't remember how many years later, and tried to sue many entities like the police, the city, for the wrongful death of McElroy, which kind of surprises me. Like, to be abused
After
by this
everything
man
she's
for so
been
long.
through,
Yeah, to be like,
but
but
maybe she was looking for, you know, she come on, she was pregnant at 14. She's never worked. She has no education. Maybe she was just looking for a way to get money to take care of her and her kids. I don't know.
yeah. I totally think it was a cash grab. And
Yeah.
because nobody would talk, she had to settle outside of court for $17,000. So went in for 6 mil, left with 17,000. And yeah,
And
that is
even through all of that, right? There was no one has ever come forward and pointed a finger at anybody in that 30 to 60 people out there who fired the shots.
no, it's actually quite impressive. Like, to
That
keep the
is,
secret that long. And they all,
that is really impressive.
yeah, and I think it brings up a good topic about if vigilantism has a place in society.
You know, you want to say no, but in a case like this, dang it. I mean, if the police can't do anything or won't do anything and they're bullied, what? I don't know.
Right. And it's not like it's just one incident. Like, this guy's a repeat offender, he's a
Yeah.
pedophile, like, just all around the worst kind of dude. And he went to court, like we talked about, for over 20 different crimes. And like his lawyer said, 3 to 4 times a year, and nothing ever happened. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know how you wouldn't get to the point that you had to take matters into your own hands.
Sometimes you gotta you weigh the greater good here, right? So I mean, he's terrorizing a whole town, and I mean, he was never a good guy. He was
No.
never a good guy, and he was only going to keep doing this and keep terrorizing people and keep shooting people and burning things down and take. He was a pedophile on top of it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, his own account. We can't
I,
allegedly. No, he impregnated a 14-year-old girl and then married her so that she couldn't testify against him. That so I well, 1980. I don't know. I don't. Other than I don't say this out of jest, but I do think Kentucky at one time you could have gotten married at 14, but I don't know when that changed. There were some southern states that allowed marriage very, very young, but I don't. 1980, it would floor me if that was the case then in Missouri. I don't know.
I think I don't want to say this and not know for sure, but I think Idaho is one of the places that you can actually pretty young um get married with parent permission. So like I think
Yeah,
there's a lot
a lot
of
of
states that
times it's
have
like
laws like that.
16 with parent permission or yeah. Well, so did he married Trina at what, 15? He impregnated her at 14, married her at 15, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Around that timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like
Yeah.
stalking, like engaged at
Yeah, but
this
she
when
was
he's 12.
12 when he started.
Yeah.
12. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's no allegedly about that.
No, he's very
And
open about it.
I feel so bad for all of the women in his life and because they were just treated so horribly. If he was this violent with the public, he was worse at home. And what his wives went through and maybe his kids, we don't know.
Yeah. There were definitely reports of what he did to some of them, but I figured it was probably too graphic to air on YouTube. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty intense, and I think the abuse spouse syndrome that women like that any men and women
Yeah.
get, like I think it's a real thing, and so I think it's easy to judge them for staying and going through what they went through, but they were kids. Like
Well, think of
you can't blame them.
I mean, if he's going to sit outside a farmer's house 100 times, what is he going to do to a woman who tries to leave? Although he did get divorced. I
Yeah, once
wonder
he
what
was
he
done with them.
was. I wonder if he was the one who wanted the divorce or if I had to have been. Because I can't imagine a narcissist like this allowing a woman to walk away from him unless he was done. He wanted something
Yeah,
younger.
I was gonna say they probably aged out, honestly. Like in
Yep.
his mind,
Yep.
probably like 18, 19. He's like, ugh, like trade her in for a new model. It's crazy.
Yeah, this guy. So the book there's a book out there called I think In Broad Daylight, right? And I
Hmm.
remember reading this when the book because my mom was she was a cop, so anything true crime. She read it and then she gave it to me to read right after it was published, and I just remember what a story. What a story. I couldn't believe terrorizing the town for so long, for decades. And then and then the town just takes him out. Nobody saw a thing. You'd think after a while somebody would crack.
Yeah,
Somebody would talk.
yeah. The only
And
way to
unless they're
keep a secret, right?
unless the shooter's dead now and they're like, yeah, well.
Yeah,
But
I think there is some like they honestly probably really trauma bonded from the stuff that they had to go through with this guy. Like I don't know. It kind of makes me a little bit proud. Like there was this community that ended up
I know,
rallying together to come against this awful person. Like I admire that. So
I
I
know,
don't
I
know.
do too. That's why I'm so like mixed on this because you don't vigilantes. I mean, you don't want to rule that way. You don't want vigilante law, but sometimes somebody's so deserved of it that you're like, good,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah.
I think we vote on like I think we like vigilantism in a little bit of an aspect. Like, when a pedophile gets sentenced to prison, right, and he doesn't get a lot of time, people are upset, but you always hear people be like, "Oh, the inmates will take care of it." Like we almost don't trust our system to do what it's supposed to do and hope someone else in the prison system is going to take care of it. So for me, like I almost understand why it might be a little bit of a necessity.
Well, and yeah, you're right. So where I grew up, there was a case of a guy who I think he used the cover of a church camp to, it was either Boy Scouts or a church camp, but I'm pretty sure it was a church camp to go after her son. And her son was 12, I think. And when he came home, he was so mentally changed that she knew something had happened. And it took weeks and weeks for him to finally open up and say what happened. So they arrested him during the trial, little tiny town. So no, you didn't have like metal detectors or anything like that at the courthouse. She walked in and shot him. She ended up going to prison for life. It just, it just crushed us all because we were from like 2 towns away. And
Right.
we're like, she did what everybody wanted to do to this guy, you know?
Right.
And as a parent, what you'd want to do. And she ended up dying from cancer in prison. And I just thought it was so wrong because what he did was so bad. And yeah, but I get it. I mean, you can't just,
Just can't
you
go
know,
out
that's
blazing.
devil angel, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't know what to do.
Right. And
So,
how many cases of vigilantism like end up with someone who was innocent getting murdered
oh yeah.
because all these people believed? Like, I get the argument, but also like there was a case, just a few years ago in Texas where some guy raped this guy's daughter and he ended up killing him, and the Texas court system was like, "No, you were just in what you were doing. Like, didn't have to serve any time or anything like that." So there's times like that where I'm like, yeah, the justice system did great. But then like this case that we just talked about where you're just like they dropped the ball, probably
Yep.
like between 20 and 30
He
times.
should have been in prison so he couldn't have hurt any of these people decades ago for all these crimes
Yeah,
that they acquitted him on. But you can't fault the town for acquitting him because they're terrified of him.
right.
But you would think that they would bond together in the jury room and say, let's get this guy behind bars and then move. So
Right.
that
Yeah.
when he gets
Yeah.
out, we're gone.
He gets max
You know?
everything. Yeah.
Right. But they don't want to be the ones. And I can't imagine uh the other thing that I think about too with this guy is how his kids acted in the store. You know who my dad is, kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Whew. Boy, I hope those kids got some psychological help because that gene that that's going to be tough for them.
Well, I'm sure living in that area, I hope they moved away and could have started new lives. Because staying in that area, like with that last name, that would follow you. Like the town would not like you. They would immediately associate you with your father. Um, there was one of the kids did an interview and talked about the candy store incident, but I think she was younger and her recollection was really different in
Yeah.
the story. So you almost kind of wonder like if they were very brainwashed into believing a certain image of their dad. And it just would be so interesting to talk to these wives later on and their children and see where they're at, what they think, like just understanding what happened mentally for them.
Well, and it would take several years to process and decompress from all of that anger that you lived with constantly.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, he was a tornado of everything bad. So, you know, it's just, oh well. I just, you never know what to say in these situations. You really don't, because
Yeah.
anyway, I hope that all the kids and the ex-wives and the town and everybody's healed. And it's now the town of Skidmore, when people go through it, the
Mm-hmm.
bar, which is no longer, the building is there, but it's no longer a bar. I mean, it's like a tourist trap. People stop and get their pictures taken in front of it now. And
Which is
so,
scary.
I mean, I would, if I go to Skidmore, that's where my picture is going to be, right? I mean, because,
Right.
yeah,
That's what's interesting.
anyway,
Yeah.
it would be interesting to ghost hunt through there. I mean,
Ooh,
that's a lot of emotion that went down right there in that spot. So,
that would be a
yeah.
really cool place.
And just so our viewers know on the topic of ghost hunts, because this video is going to be out probably tomorrow, we are doing a live ghost hunt. We're going to live stream it on Facebook and on this channel I'm doing a brain fog. Where are we going?
Annie's Hall.
Annie Hall's. God, what's wrong with me? At Annie Hall's Boutique, and that's in Old Town Pocatello on First Street. It's Annie Hall was an amazing lady and an amazing. She had a lot of gifts in the clairvoyant field, and so the building itself is a building that I have actually been in before it was Annie Hall's, so it's going to be really interesting to go back. I think you're going to see some really interesting paranormal investigation. So that is next Saturday on January 20th. We're going to start probably about 6:30 live streaming. So I hope that you'll join us. Well, good story. Thank you, Haywire, for bringing this one up. And I think this was a good topic. So please like and subscribe. Our numbers are starting to really climb, and we're just so happy to share our videos, watch our shorts. Decon is a nut. He's recording all the time, silly clips, and I just love him. He cracks me up. But and so I guess with that, we'll end. And make sure that you look both ways before you cross Nightmare Road.